Scorpio's most dangerous gift. Scorpio. Part 1. The silent blade. When Scorpio cuts without touching, there's no scream, no slamming doors, no grand exit, just silence. And suddenly, you can't breathe. In the modern world, power is often loud. It boasts. It performs. It dominates the room with noise and presence. But the most dangerous power of all is quiet. It doesn't have to raise its voice. It doesn't have to touch you. It simply withdraws and leaves you to wrestle with the echo. That is the gift of Scorpio. You won't always see it coming. That's part of what makes it deadly. Scorpios don't strike with brute force. They cut with awareness, with clarity, with soul-level precision that no surgeon could match. And when they decide to sever a connection, they do so not with malice, but with certainty. And that certainty will haunt you. They don't shout when betrayed. They don't seek revenge in the traditional sense. Instead, they evaporate. You blink, and the warmth is gone. The connection is dead. The loyalty, which once wrapped you in safety like a cloak, now feels like a ghost pressing against your ribs. And the most terrifying part? They don't explain. They don't owe you a paragraph, a confrontation, or a cathartic goodbye. When a Scorpio lets go, it's not a reaction, it's a decision. One made long before you noticed the shift, long before the distance felt real. They've already sat with the pain, already weighed your soul on their internal scale. And in the deep stillness where they do their emotional arithmetic, the answer was clear. You no longer belong in their sacred space. Some call it cold, others call it cruel. But those who truly understand Scorpio know better. This isn't cruelty. It's self-respect forged in fire. It's the survival instinct of a sign that's been to hell and back, and refuses to be dragged there again. Their power lies not in destruction, but in refusal. They simply stop protecting you from the consequences of who you are. Imagine this. You're in a relationship, friendship, romance, or family with a Scorpio. You've taken them for granted. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe you thought they'd never leave. Maybe you assumed their silence meant forgiveness. It didn't. It meant study. Scorpio was observing, gathering data, watching the pattern you didn't think they'd notice. Then one day it's gone. No text, no call, no drama. Just the sound of yourself echoing through an empty room where once their energy lived. That absence, it's not passive, it's surgical. They didn't disappear. They extracted themselves flawlessly. Because Scorpio understands something few ever grasp. You don't have to touch someone to cut them. You just have to stop shielding them from their own reflection. They are the mirror, not a soft one, not a gentle one, but a spiritual mirror that shows you, clearly, ruthlessly, without distortion, who you really are. When they walk away, you're left staring into yourself. And for many, that's far more painful than any blade. Scorpio's most dangerous gift isn't about vengeance. It's about awakening. They won't ruin your life, but they'll stop cushioning your fall. They won't fight to be understood. They'll vanish and force you to sit with the question, why did they leave? And that question will echo louder than their silence ever could. New Moon to be continued in Part 2. The anatomy of the Scorpio gaze, how they see what you can't hide. Part 2. The anatomy of the Scorpio gaze, how they see what you can't hide. Before they cut you, Scorpio has already seen you. Not the version you show the world, but the one you hide in the dark. There is something unsettling about being seen by a Scorpio. Not glanced at, not noticed. Seen, down to your core, your contradictions, your unresolved childhood wounds, your hidden jealousy, your quiet desperation. All of it. Their gaze doesn't wander, it lands. It pierces. And for many, it's too much. Because Scorpio isn't looking for your charm, your style, or your clever words. They're scanning you for truth. And if truth isn't there, they'll find what you've buried beneath it. Some say it's psychic. Others say it's ancestral memory, soul pattern recognition, or quantum-level intuition. Whatever the name, it's real. Sit in silence with a Scorpio for 3 minutes, and you'll feel it. That strange sensation that your internal world is being excavated without a word spoken. It's not just about what you say. It's about what you hesitate to say. It's not just about your smile. It's about the flicker behind your eyes when you force it. It's about the way your energy contracts when truth gets too close. And Scorpio sees all of it. They were born to decode silence. While other signs are distracted by the performance of personality, Scorpio is reading the subtext of your soul. You tell them you're fine, but your tone said otherwise. You say you don't care, but your nervous fidgeting says you do. You laugh at something painful, and they don't laugh with you. They know what you're doing. They know what you're hiding. And in that moment, you are exposed. Not judged, not mocked, just exposed. This is the beginning of their most dangerous gift. Because before they ever walk away, before they ever cut you with silence, they see you. They catalog the inconsistencies. They track the cracks in your narrative. They feel the disconnect between your words and your truth like a draft through a closed window. They don't confront immediately. Scorpio is never rushed. They don't need to. They are patient witnesses to your unraveling. Let me tell you a story. A woman, vibrant, successful, charismatic, was married to a Scorpio man. She prided herself on being emotionally intelligent, always in control, always poised. But in private, she often slipped into subtle manipulations, withholding affection to punish, using guilt to gain attention, hiding small betrayals behind spiritual language. She thought he didn't notice. He never reacted, never accused, never exploded. But one day he was gone. Not physically. He still came home, still shared meals. But his energy? Withdrawn. His gaze? No longer searching for connection. It had already found the answer. He didn't yell. He didn't explain. He simply began the sacred ritual of emotional detachment. And eventually, she asked, "What's wrong?" He looked at her, calm, unblinking, and replied, "I already saw everything I needed to see." That was it. That was the cut. Because with Scorpio, the real damage is never loud. It's in the precision of that knowing. That moment when you realize they saw the truth you hoped no one ever would. And they're not angry. They're not wounded. They're just done. That's when you feel the silence shift into something else, something holy, something irreversible. You're no longer hiding. Because there's no more point. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered under their gaze. Scorpio's eyes are not weapons. They are X-rays. They don't harm you. They reveal you. And in that revelation, people either run, lash out, or transform. That's the gift. That's the danger. Because once a Scorpio sees you clearly, you are faced with a choice. Will you become the truth they see in you? Or will you crumble beneath it? New Moon to be continued in Part 3. Scorpio's sacred withdrawal, when they vanish without a word. Part 3. Scorpio's sacred withdrawal, when they vanish without a word. It doesn't come with thunder. It doesn't come with a slammed door. It comes like a shift in the wind. Suddenly, they're gone. But everything still echoes with their presence. When Scorpio withdraws, it is not an accident. It is not an emotional tantrum or a passive-aggressive ploy for attention. It is a ritual, a sacred severing, a silent ceremony of self-respect. And it begins long before you ever realize it. They don't just walk away. They retreat their spirit from you first. Scorpio is a fixed water sign, still like a glacier on the surface, but containing entire worlds beneath. When they bond with you, they don't just offer affection. They offer access. Access to their energy, their protection, their psychic radar, their loyalty, which feels like emotional armor wrapped around your life. But when something shifts, a betrayal, a pattern, a break in integrity, Scorpio doesn't shout. They sense. They observe. And if it crosses their internal boundary, the withdrawal begins. At first, it's subtle. The texts slow down. The gaze softens, not with warmth, but distance. The warmth in their voice cools like embers losing fire. You think they're just tired. You tell yourself it's a phase. But inside Scorpio, a portal is closing. Quietly. Permanently. And here's the truth people rarely admit. Scorpio doesn't leave because they stopped caring. They leave because they cared too much. They gave. They watched. They warned. Not with words, but with presence. And when that presence was not honored, when their energy was mishandled, they initiated the most dangerous part of their gift. Total energetic disengagement. This is the kind of disappearance that doesn't require physical absence. They could still be sitting next to you, but you feel the hollow space. Their aura has stepped back. The psychic umbilical cord has been severed. And whether you understand it or not, the truth begins to throb in your chest. You've lost something sacred. Unlike other signs that need closure through confrontation, Scorpio closes doors from the inside. They don't yell, "I'm done." They simply are. They disappear without spectacle. They vanish without vengeance. And that's what makes it holy. That's what makes it hurt. Because when someone disappears without harming you, you are left to harm yourself, with memory, with regret, with every word you didn't say and every pattern you refused to change. Scorpio doesn't punish you with fire. They punish you with silence. And in that silence, you are finally left alone with the truth of your actions. Let me paint this in a way you'll never forget. A Scorpio woman once loved a man who confused silence with submission. He lied, thinking he was clever. He withheld, thinking he was strong. And when she looked him in the eye, knowing everything he had done, she said nothing. Not because she didn't feel, but because she had already begun the ceremony. She began to retrieve her power strand by strand, like a priestess unraveling a thread from a dying ritual. Her smile faded. Her heartbeat no longer reached him. And then one morning, she was no longer his. No goodbye, no confrontation, just absence. Because with Scorpio, when you violate the unspoken, you lose the unspoken. This is the sacred withdrawal. It is not about control. It is about sovereignty. It is the moment when Scorpio chooses their soul over the survival of something false. You might chase. You might apologize. But Scorpio has already crossed the river, and they burn the boat behind them. Not because they hate you, but because they love themselves more than the illusion they once shared with you. New Moon to be continued in Part 4. Energetic execution, the cut you can't see. Part 4. Energetic execution, the cut you can't see. There are no words, no warnings, no wounds you can show to the world. But inside, something's been severed. You just don't know how to explain it. That's because Scorpio didn't touch your body. They touched your energy. And then they pulled theirs away. Scorpio rules the 8th house, the house of death, transformation, and unseen power. And that includes energy. Most people walk through life unaware of how energy truly works. But not Scorpio. Scorpio feels everything, not just what's said, but what's vibrating underneath. They can walk into a room and sense who is lying, without a single word spoken. They feel the drop in frequency when someone is hiding something. They detect the fracture in the field when trust is broken. They don't need receipts. They don't need evidence. They feel the cut before it's made. And when Scorpio decides to remove their energy from you, the result is unlike anything you've felt before. At first, it's confusing. You still have their number. You still see their face. Maybe you even still hear their voice. But something is off. Your laughter doesn't land the same way. Your charm bounces off them like light on obsidian. The warmth is gone, not from their words, but from the space between them. This is energetic execution. Scorpio doesn't just walk away from people. They pull back what was never visible, but always vital. Their loyalty, which once covered you like armor. Their empathy, which once absorbed your pain without asking. Their intuitive protection, which once shielded you from your own chaos. Now it's all gone, and in its place is a void. Not just emotional, spiritual. The terrifying truth is that you never understood what Scorpio gave you until they took it back. Because what they gave wasn't physical. It was protection at the soul level. When they loved you, they extended their aura around you. They watched your blind spots. They buffered your stormy moments with their spiritual calm. They stood between you and your own self-destruction without ever saying a word. And now that shield is gone, this is the power few ever talk about. The power to leave a person bleeding from wounds no one else can see. Not because Scorpio attacked, but because they stopped covering the parts of you that were always broken. Let me explain this with a real-life metaphor. Imagine standing in the sun every day. You take it for granted. It's warm, constant. You assume it will always rise. And one day, it doesn't. Suddenly, the world is dimmer. Your skin is colder. Your vision is blurred. And you realize you never loved the sun. You just needed it. And now that it's gone, you finally feel the absence. That's what it feels like to be cut by Scorpio's energy. They don't scream. They don't curse. They just turn off the light. Because Scorpio knows. Not all wounds need blood. Some wounds just need the truth to finally show. And that truth is this. You never saw them as clearly as they saw you. You never gave what they gave. And when they withdrew, you were left naked. Not because they stripped you, but because their presence once covered what you were unwilling to face. This is not revenge. This is clarity. This is energetic execution, the silent gift of a sign that doesn't need to destroy you to teach you. They simply leave and let you meet the chaos they once kept at bay. New Moon to be continued in Part 5. Why their absence hurts more than words ever could. Part 5. Why their absence hurts more than words ever could. Some goodbyes are loud, messy, unforgettable. But Scorpio's goodbye, it doesn't come with words. It comes with silence, and it echoes forever. There are few pains more haunting than the absence of a Scorpio. Not because they shouted, not because they shattered you, but because they simply stopped existing in your emotional field. And the truth is, you often don't realize how much space they took up until they're no longer holding it. You don't realize how safe you felt, how seen, how energetically shielded, until suddenly, you're alone with your chaos. And no one is absorbing it anymore. When Scorpio walks away, they take nothing from you, except the mirror. And that mirror was everything. It reflected not just your strengths, but your weaknesses. Not to judge, but to help you see. When they were present, you felt known. Even when you couldn't name what you felt, they could. They translated your silences. They made sense of your moods. They heard what you didn't say, but now they're gone. And everything feels louder, colder, more confusing. Their absence isn't quiet. It's deafening, because it forces you to hear the things you've been avoiding. Your own dishonesty, your emotional laziness, your patterns, your shadows. Scorpio didn't cut you to wound you. They cut you to stop protecting you from yourself. And that is why it hurts. Not because they were cruel, but because you finally feel what they once held back for you, without ever asking for credit. Let me show you this with a story. A man once fell in love with a Scorpio woman. He loved her beauty, her intensity, her ability to understand things he couldn't even articulate. She made him feel powerful, like someone had finally seen him. But over time, he grew distant. He wanted freedom. He played games. He assumed she'd never leave. Then one day, she changed. Not her clothes, not her tone, her presence. She stopped reaching. She stopped sensing. And soon after, she was simply not there. He told his friends she ghosted him. He told himself she was cold. But deep down, in the marrow of his being, he knew she had been leaving for a long time. And he just didn't notice the warmth fading from her hands until she stopped holding him altogether. Because Scorpio doesn't just cut you to punish. They withdraw to teach. They leave so you can finally feel your own absence, the part of you that never showed up, the honesty you withheld, the loyalty you performed, the truth you refused to face. Their absence hurts not because they were perfect, but because they were real. This is the essence of their most dangerous gift. To leave behind a silence that makes you listen. To retreat so that you are forced to face what their presence once softened. Not everyone survives this. Some people spiral. Some lash out. Some finally awaken. But no one walks away unmarked. Because when Scorpio leaves, they don't just disappear from your life. They disappear from your spirit. And in that space they once held, you're left with only the echo of what could have been. New Moon to be continued in Part 6. The Scorpio Mirror. How they force you to see yourself. Part 6. The Scorpio Mirror. How they force you to see yourself. Some people reflect your best. Some reflect your potential. But Scorpio, they reflect your truth. Even when you're not ready to see it. Scorpio doesn't need to judge you. They simply see you. And what they see is not filtered by politeness, fear, or fantasy. They see what is, not what you pretend to be. And that, in itself, is terrifying. Because most people, whether they admit it or not, are walking contradictions. We wear masks to survive. We speak half-truths to be loved. We bury wounds so deep, we forget they ever bled. But Scorpio lives in the underworld, and they will not play pretend. They will not co-sign your performance. Their presence alone is a mirror that strips away your facade, layer by layer, until all that's left is you. And that is when the fear begins. Not fear of Scorpio, but fear of who you are when you're no longer being protected from your reflection. When a Scorpio is in your life, you start to feel things you thought were long dead. Shame, guilt, desire, grief, hunger, truth. They don't tell you what's wrong. They just look at you, and you know. You feel their gaze pulling at the seams of your soul, inviting your secrets to surface, daring your shadows to speak. And suddenly you realize, you can't hide here. Not from them, and not from yourself. This is why Scorpio's most dangerous gift isn't just the power to cut. It's the power to reveal. And once the veil is lifted, nothing can be unseen. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio therapist. Quiet, measured, deep. He once worked with a highly successful entrepreneur, a man admired for his confidence and control. But beneath it, that man was drowning, addicted to approval, haunted by a father's voice, terrified of being nothing without status. The Scorpio therapist said very little, but his gaze never wavered. His presence never flinched. One day, in the middle of a session, the entrepreneur broke. Tears came, rage followed, and he finally shouted, "Why aren't you saying anything?" The therapist responded gently, "Because I already know who you are. I'm just waiting for you to be ready to see it." That was the moment everything changed. This is Scorpio's gift. They don't push. They don't preach. They wait, like a mirror, until you can no longer run from your own reflection. And when you resist, when you pretend, when you wear your mask a little too tight, they don't rip it off. They just stand there, unmoving, unblinking, until the mask crumbles on its own, under the unbearable weight of being seen. Most people will either rise from this, or retreat. Some will evolve, some will collapse, but no one leaves unchanged. Because being truly seen, without illusion, without rescue, without escape, is the beginning of real transformation. That's what Scorpio offers. Not comfort, not praise, but the opportunity to finally become who you actually are. But here's the catch. Only the brave can survive the mirror, and only the honest can love the one holding it. New Moon to be continued in Part 7. The cost of betraying a Scorpio's trust. Part 7. The cost of betraying a Scorpio's trust. With other signs, trust is given gradually. With Scorpio, it is given soul first. And when you break it, you don't just lose their trust. You lose their entire universe. Scorpio does not trust easily, not because they are closed, but because they are sacredly selective. When they allow someone into their emotional core, they are not just offering affection, they are offering spiritual alliance. And that kind of bond isn't casual. It's not surface level. It is ancient, an energetic vow, a karmic contract sealed in silence. So when you betray a Scorpio, you're not just breaking a promise, you are shattering a ritual. Betrayal, to Scorpio, isn't about one lie. It's not just the text you deleted or the secret you held. It's about energetic violation. You were inside their field. You were under their protection. You were trusted with their silence, their past, their shadow. You were given the map to their underworld, and you used it to sabotage their sanctuary. That is unforgivable, not out of spite, but out of soul defense. This is why the Scorpio cut runs so deep. Because it is not a reaction, it is a burial. They do not unlove you with anger. They mourn you with reverence. Like one grieves the dead, you're not simply removed from their life. You are laid to rest in their emotional graveyard, with all the others who thought loyalty was optional, who mistook intensity for weakness, who believed Scorpio would never walk away. They do walk away, and when they do, it's total. Let me share a story that will stay with you. A Scorpio man once gave everything to his best friend. Business advice, emotional support, secrets no one else knew. They were like brothers, bonded in blood and time. But one day, that friend betrayed him in the smallest way. He shared a private moment for clout. Just a story, just a conversation, just a joke. Nothing big, at least that's what the friend thought. But to Scorpio, it was everything. Because what he shared was sacred. What was violated was the altar of trust. And after that moment, Scorpio never called again, never explained, never looked back. The friend tried, wrote messages, left voicemails, begged, but the Scorpio never responded. Because to him, that friendship had already died the moment it was exposed for sport. This is the cost of betrayal with Scorpio. There is no grand explosion, no dramatic confrontation. There is only the quiet retreat of someone who has already decided that you're no longer safe. And once Scorpio has decided that, you don't just lose access to their time, you lose access to their soul. That is why people say Scorpio's silence is the loudest punishment. Because it's not meant to hurt you. It's meant to honor the wound you created by never opening it again. And in that silence, you are left to bleed from the cut you caused. New Moon to be continued in Part 8. The intensity of Scorpio love and its death. Part 8. The intensity of Scorpio love and its death. When a Scorpio loves you, it's not a feeling. It's a transformation. It's a fire that burns clean through your soul. And when that fire dies, what remains is ash, memory, and silence. No one loves like a Scorpio. Their love is not performative, not transactional, not casual. It is sacred, alchemical, total. When a Scorpio chooses you, truly chooses you, they are not giving you romance. They are giving you rebirth. You don't just fall in love with a Scorpio. You fall into them, into their abyss, into their protection, into their silence, their gaze, their essence. And in return, they ask for one thing. Don't lie to me. Not with words. Not with energy. Not with absence. Because the moment Scorpio senses deceit in the current, a rift begins to open. And once that rift grows wide enough, the love begins to die. But here's the thing about Scorpio love. It doesn't die loudly. It dies sacredly, like a god turning its face away. They don't scream. They don't beg. They simply stop glowing for you. And that is a death unlike any other. Because when Scorpio loves, they become your soul's home, your mirror, your energetic protector, your unseen strength. You don't just lose them when the love dies. You lose a version of yourself that only existed in their presence. You lose the safety of being understood without explanation. You lose the comfort of being held in your darkness. You lose the intensity that made even silence feel electric. And when that's gone, even the most crowded room feels empty. Let me show you something real. A woman once said, "I didn't realize I was truly loved until I was loved by a Scorpio. And I didn't realize how much of me had been built inside that love until I had to live without it." She wasn't talking about the flowers or the affection. She was talking about the energy, that rare, raw, soul-bound intensity that only a Scorpio can give. And once it's gone, you don't just grieve them. You grieve the version of you that only existed in their flame. The death of Scorpio love is not punishment. It is completion. A cycle has ended. The ritual is over. The altar is cold. And like the phoenix they embody, Scorpio will burn it down, not with vengeance, but with clarity. If the bond no longer honors the soul, it must return to dust. People think Scorpio love is dangerous because of how fiercely it burns. But the real danger is in its absence, in the haunting echo of what used to be, the emotional gravity that once kept your world intact, and now feels like a vanished galaxy. You still orbit where they once stood, but the star is gone. This is the pain that few ever talk about, not the pain of losing a partner, but the pain of losing a love that reshaped your soul. And no matter how much you chase it, Scorpio never returns to what is already burned. New Moon to be continued in Part 9. Why Scorpio doesn't argue, they just end it. Part 9. Why Scorpio doesn't argue, they just end it. Scorpio doesn't argue, not because they don't have the words, but because they already know the truth. And they know, arguing with truth is a waste of soul. In a world full of noise, opinions, ego battles, and never-ending back and forths, Scorpio stands apart. Not because they don't feel deeply, but because they've learned that some things are too sacred to debate. Scorpio doesn't need to convince you. They don't plead for you to understand. They don't fight to be seen or heard. They observe. They decide. They disappear. And in that silence, in that sharp severing without theatrics, lies the deepest, most mystifying power they hold. The power to end what no longer aligns, without explanation. Because Scorpio isn't here to perform emotional gymnastics. They've already read between your lines. They've already decoded your tone, your patterns, your hesitations. By the time you realize something is wrong, Scorpio has already seen enough. They've weighed your truth against your actions. And when the math doesn't add up, they don't request clarification. They exit. Clean. Precise. Quiet. It's not because they're cold. It's because they're done. Emotionally. Energetically. Spiritually. And when a Scorpio is done, they don't slam doors. They don't leave evidence. They just vanish. And leave you wondering how silence could scream so loud. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman was dating a man who constantly flirted with the line between loyalty and betrayal. He never outright cheated, but he kept emotional secrets. He thought, if she hasn't said anything, she must not know. But she knew. She always knew. And one evening, after dinner and wine and laughter, she looked at him with a calm he couldn't interpret, and simply said, "This is the last time we'll sit across from each other like this." He laughed. He didn't take it seriously. He thought she was being dramatic, but he never heard from her again. Scorpio doesn't threaten. They don't need to, because their decisions are not made in reaction, they're made in revelation. They've seen what they needed to see. They felt what you didn't say, and now the connection is dead. Not with a fight, but with finality. People call it ruthless, but it's not. It's soul preservation. Scorpio has learned that some battles can't be won, because some opponents don't even know they're fighting with truth. And Scorpio refuses to lower their frequency, to prove something they already know in their bones. So they let go, not to punish you, but to protect their own evolution. Because every time they argue, they lose a piece of themselves. And Scorpio has done enough losing. Their silence is not avoidance. It is sacred clarity. And when they go quiet, you are already living in their absence. New Moon to be continued in Part 10. The Phoenix Effect. How Scorpio burns then rebirths. Part 10. The Phoenix Effect. How Scorpio burns then rebirths. Most people fear the fire. Scorpio walks into it because they know what dies in the flame was never meant to last, and what rises from it is who they truly are. Scorpio's pain doesn't destroy them. It refines them. Where others crumble, Scorpio alchemizes. Where others beg for mercy, Scorpio opens their arms to the blaze and says, "Take what isn't real. Leave only what's true." This is the Phoenix Effect. It's not just metaphor. It's how they live. A Scorpio doesn't go through endings. They become the ending, so that something new can be born. When a Scorpio ends a relationship, a pattern, a life chapter, they don't linger. They don't bargain with fate. They burn it all. The memories, the attachment, even the version of themselves who once cared. Not because they're heartless, but because rebirth requires total surrender. Scorpio doesn't fear death, because they've died 1,000 times already. In silence, in heartbreak, in betrayals that shattered the soul. And each time, they have risen. Not harder, wiser, more precise, more intentional, more connected to the truth of who they are. Let me show you how this looks in real life. A Scorpio man once went through a devastating betrayal, not from a lover, but from his own family. For months, he tried to hold things together, tried to forgive, tried to be the bigger person. But eventually he stopped trying. He lit the match. He moved cities, cut all ties, even changed his name. And 3 years later, when someone asked him about that time in his life, he simply said, "I'm not that person anymore." He died. I survived him. That is the Phoenix. Scorpio doesn't carry ashes. They rise from them. And that rise, it's not petty. It's not about revenge. It's about transformation so complete that nothing of the old life fits anymore. You can't reach them the way you used to. Your words don't land. Your old control tactics fail because you're talking to a new soul, one who has already buried the old wound inside sacred fire. This is why trying to get back with a Scorpio who has evolved is like knocking on a house that's already burned to the ground. You can call out, you can cry, but no one lives there anymore. Scorpio's power doesn't lie in how they destroy. It lies in how they transform destruction into clarity. Where others cling to broken pieces, Scorpio builds a new temple. Where others mourn the flame, Scorpio becomes it. And this is the real reason they can cut you without a word. Because by the time you realize what you've lost, they've already been reborn. And they have no interest in returning to the ashes you still cling to. New Moon to be continued in Part 11. Psychic Power and the Scorpio Time Bomb. Part 11. Psychic Power and the Scorpio Time Bomb. You think they forgot. You think they moved on. You think the silence means surrender. But Scorpio was never done. They were waiting. No sign stores memory like Scorpio. Not in journals. Not in voice memos. But in the bones of their soul. Every glance you thought went unnoticed, they logged it. Every lie you told with a smile, they recorded it. Every subtle disrespect you whispered in the tone of your voice. They felt it, and they didn't flinch. Because Scorpio doesn't need to react in real time. They have patience sharper than revenge, and a memory longer than your apology. This is what makes them dangerous. They wait, not to punish, but to allow truth to ripen. Because Scorpio knows that what's hidden in darkness always comes to light, eventually. So while others lash out, Scorpio stays silent. But their silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's alignment. They are the psychic time bomb. You may think the connection is fine. They're still around, still talking, still calm. But deep beneath the surface, Scorpio has already begun the countdown. They're watching to see if the pattern will repeat. They're studying your soul like an ancient map, not to control you, but to decide, is this worth resurrecting? Or must I destroy it to protect myself? Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman was in a long-term relationship with a man who was charming, but dishonest in quiet ways. He never hit her, never screamed, never cheated outright. But he lied through omission, withheld affection, invalidated her intuition. She said nothing. She didn't argue. She kept cooking dinner, smiling, even making love. But one morning, she woke up, packed 2 bags, and left the country. Just like that. And when asked why, she simply said, "He crossed the line 6 months ago. I was just watching to see if he'd cross it again." That's Scorpio. They don't explode. They evolve out of your reach. You think everything is fine, until it isn't. Because by the time the silence arrives, the decision was made long ago. Their psychic power isn't about mind games. It's about soul wisdom. They can see who you'll become before you become it. They can feel the end of a relationship before you say a word. And they can exit your life before you even know they're halfway out the door. Scorpio's psychic gift is not in predicting outcomes. It's in knowing who you really are, beneath your performance, beneath your promises, beneath your potential. And if that truth doesn't align with theirs, the countdown begins. This is why people say being loved by a Scorpio is intense. Because even in stillness, they are processing every layer of you. And one day, without warning, without rage, without explanation, they detonate the silence. And everything falls apart, exactly when it was meant to. New Moon to be concluded in Part 12. The final cut, the spiritual truth behind their silence. Part 12. The final cut, the spiritual truth behind their silence. You thought it was rejection. You thought it was punishment. But Scorpio's silence was never about you losing them. It was about you finding yourself. In the end, Scorpio's most dangerous gift, the ability to cut you without laying a finger, is not about destruction. It's about transcendence. Scorpio doesn't sever ties to be cruel. They don't vanish to create suffering. They disappear because staying would dishonor their soul and yours. What feels like abandonment is actually a sacred invitation. An invitation to look at what they could no longer hold for you. An invitation to face what their presence once softened. An invitation to meet the truth, not just about the relationship, but about who you are when no one is protecting you from yourself. Their silence is not the absence of love. It is the echo of boundaries you crossed. It is the quiet return of responsibility, handed back to you like a mirror made of fire. Scorpio doesn't yell. They don't convince. They don't debate. Because they know, what isn't in alignment must end. What isn't soul deep must fall away. And if you couldn't rise with them, they will rise without you. Not because they hate you, but because they refuse to betray their own evolution. Let me share this one final story. A Scorpio man once loved someone who didn't love themselves. He gave her depth. He held her darkness. He nurtured her wounds. But she couldn't meet him in truth. She feared his intensity. She mistook his silence for danger, not devotion. And when she left, he didn't chase. He didn't fight. He let her go because he knew, if she's not ready to see herself, she'll never truly see me. And in his silence, she eventually did. That's the final cut. Not a punishment, not a power move, but a moment of divine clarity. Scorpio's silence doesn't cut you. It hands you the knife and asks, what will you do with your reflection? Some will collapse under the weight of what they see. Some will lash out. Some will run. But a few, a rare, chosen few, will awaken. They will look into that mirror. They will see their pain, their patterns, their potential, and they will rise. Because that is the true purpose of Scorpio's gift. Not to end relationships, but to end illusions. Not to destroy others, but to destroy what's false. Not to leave people behind, but to awaken what's been sleeping inside them all along. Scorpio's cut is never just the end of something. It's the beginning of a deeper self. And if you listen closely, beneath the silence, beneath the grief, beneath the memory of everything you once shared, you'll hear it. I didn't cut you to kill you. I cut you to set you free. New Moon final reflection. If Scorpio has ever cut you in silence, ask yourself, what truth were they asking you to see? And are you finally ready to face it? Speech balloon closing call to action. If this message struck a chord in your soul, if you've ever felt the burn of Scorpio's absence or the truth of their gaze, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the Path to Buddhist Wisdom for more journeys into astrology, truth, and soul-deep transformation. Because here, we don't run from darkness. We walk through it. Together. Scorpio fire.